When the original iPhone was announced, the camera wasn't important at all, barely getting a mention from Steve Jobs in that legendary keynote.
You have a 2-megapixel camera built in, as I said.
What mattered at the time was that you could pinch to zoom.
And so I can just move them further apart and stretch the image.
That was amazing. And yet, over the 15 years since then, the iPhone evolved from 3 devices in one.
Are you getting it?
To 4. In that time, we've seen many new features and improvements, leading us to the large 48-megapixel sensor found in the iPhone 14 Pro. When I reviewed it last fall, I noticed that photos taken in RAW are amazing, and that photos taken normally look kind of processed. And so it got me curious about the evolution of the iPhone camera. Brandon Lee and I went and took photos with every iPhone we could get our hands on. My eyes are still burning. Okay, so I should first confess that this idea is actually the brainchild of Brandon Lee. He's had an ever-growing interest in capturing light, so obviously he's curious about the iPhone cameras.
You want so badly to have something in your head work out in front of a camera, and especially at the beginning, it doesn't. That challenge of like, okay, closer, 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 you get a little bit better, you learn one thing, you get a little bit better, and then I got addicted to it.
Over the last 15 years, Apple has made 28 different versions of their iPhone camera. And that's not even counting all the software features they add on top of it.
The iPhone is the most used camera in the world. What has Apple chosen to do in the evolution of this product to improve the camera, and why? I want to know why.
Though, as Marcus Brownlee recently demonstrated in his annual camera comparison, the iPhone processing is letting it down compared to the others. So maybe we can see where and when this trend started. I remember the first camera phones, people were like, they put a camera on it. It was just amazing that it had a camera to begin with.
That's crazy to think about.
To do this, we assembled a wide history of 23 iPhones to take 3 different photos. After a wet West Coast winter snowfall, they are a daytime photo of a building, a nighttime picture of me working on a frozen MacBook, and a portrait of me with portrait mode. We're missing 2 phones because one was mislabeled on eBay, and the other is a diagnostics phone from an Apple factory. The first photo we wanted to examine is of the Fort Langley Community Hall in Langley.
Ideal, but boring at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think this is like a very good flat.
Nice flat photo.
Everything can be judged pretty easily.
Well, let's take a look at it. I love how de-emphasized the camera is on this phone. Like, it's just a little dot.
Because cameras weren't even common on phones at that point. All right, 1, 2, 3. Oh.
It's like looking, in an old-timey photo.
Old-timey potato.
Old-timey potato with color.
I don't even think it's in focus. You couldn't even...
It's probably a fixed focus camera.
You couldn't pick your focus. I don't think anyone thought that the original iPhone was a good camera.
Okay, so the first iPhone wasn't really about the camera. So what about the iPhone 3GS? Because it's having a bit of a moment, which I'll tell you about after this video's sponsor, WarThunder. It is a free-to-play online military combat game that runs on macOS by battling it out on over 100 major battlefields from World War II to the modern present day. Take advantage of the arsenal of more than 2,000 historically accurate machinery that were used as far back as the 1910s. Head to the link below to start playing WarThunder for free today, and you'll even get a bonus vehicle just for signing up. Okay, so what happened is Brandon sent me this amusing article from Petapixel. It's about a group of social media influencers who love the aesthetic of this 13-year-old phone.
People 20 years younger are using the iPhone 3GS for the aesthetic, which is bizarre to me.
It was the first phone to have video.
It's also the aesthetic.
What do you think about this aesthetic?
I'm not convinced, Jonathan.
Well, it's got a rough charm. No?
See, I want to go right in there.
Really get in there.
I see artifacting, chromatic
look at that.
aberration.
It's like a rainbow.
0 on detail.
Moving on.
Every time I put the 4 up, I'm so impressed by how much better it looks.
Do you think it's the Retina screen or the camera? I mean, it was a huge leap.
From here to here, that's pretty significant.
It's a big deal. It was a big deal, yeah, because it went from 3.2 megapixels to 5.
I can also see this says Fort Langley Community Hall, 1931.
So what happened next? Whoa.
I've always been curious where in the iPhone's lifespan did that happen, and why did that happen, and why did no one else even stand a chance? Man, that looks good too. I think that the iPhone 4S, hands down, is the biggest jump in quality in the iPhone's lifetime. We already get into photos that are pretty respectable even when we hit the 4S.
Even compared to stuff now?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Well, because now it's harder. If you weren't a pro at photos, you could look at this and it would still hold up to some extent.
What about buying a 4S for the aesthetic reasons as opposed to a 3GS?
The imperfection is the aesthetic.
Yeah.
Is this generation they added the whole color filter thing?
The color filter thing actually wasn't added with the 5S specifically, it was added with iOS 7.
Oh, okay.
Which I still can't forgive.
So yeah, what's going on here?
I really don't like the 5S. To be very clear, this is my subjective opinion of this test that we did. There are obviously going to be situations where the 5S probably can beat the 4S in terms of its detail or whatever. But when I look at this photo, okay, there's that. And then here's the 4S.
Yeah, it's way clearer. The 5S should be technically a better photo with even all the specs on it, but it somehow isn't.
When I look at the 4S and the 5S, I'm almost disappointed at the 5S because I would expect the 5S to be better. And this is why I think the 4S is
the big jump.
The jump.
But do regular people agree with Brandon? Let's ask a couple of people.
Okay, no, definitely the one on the right. It's a lot more legible when I zoom in.
You're noticing it's clear. Which one do you prefer?
Probably the one on the right. What?
Thank you, Mark. No, that's great. That's exactly the answer I wanted.
Oh, the one on the left.
Really?
Yeah.
What matters to you in that photo then?
I think that the photo on the right is just a bit too bright. It looks blurry without zooming in. Whereas the one on the left side, I feel like the entire photo kind of works a lot better.
So you prefer the 5S?
I do.
Honestly, I think I prefer the one on the right. I think you look more natural. The one on the left looks a little over-processed. I can't really describe it, but it looks maybe too sharp or too not natural looking, I guess.
Just to verify, you prefer the 5S?
Yeah, I think I do.
What's interesting here is that Brandon and Mark are the photographers in the group, whereas Brandon and Sarah just take photos.
I don't know. How do you tell these different? Do you know what this is?
I have a photograph.
Do you know what this is?
That's a 13.
Because I don't.
That's a 14 plus.
How do you know that? When we look at the 10, we see
The 10R, yeah.
the crunchiness isn't really there. And then we move on. The 11,
A little bit more.
you start to see it because of deep fusion.
Yeah.
Move on to the 12, and it's there.
It's like alive.
That's in your
I
face.
feel like it's gonna like come out and attack me.
Here's the 13.
Oh, interesting.
Deep
It's
fusion.
less now. It's very sharp, but it's not as bright.
Oh, they paired it back here.
Well, they paired the exposure back on that. It makes you wonder where Apple has moved their processing since then, and the best way to see that is at night.
This situation was really where I noticed the trend in sharpness.
Yeah, it's like
that is
it's really coming out.
significant. Like, you really can see it. Most people are gonna pick this one, I think. Do I like this trend? I don't know.
I will say I've never really been impressed by my iPhone camera. I hate like artificial sharpness in photography, and the right side has a lot of that. Like, I zoomed into the tree and it just looks bad. It's like a lot more manipulated by the software, whereas with the left side here, yeah, it feels a lot more like I'm actually staring at this scene that's happening.
Yeah, you can definitely tell the one on the right does feel a little bit more over sharpened. I don't like it. I like the one on the left for that. The left looks more smooth.
Yeah.
The right looks more sharp, and I don't like either of those.
The biggest difference I really see in this photo is sharpness and texture. The left one just looks like it's better. The color temperature and the colors and the dynamic range all look fairly similar. I think it looks a little unnatural on the tree, but everything else I think looks pretty good. And like I said, my main issue with the iPhone sharpening from what I've seen is usually when it's just like a close-up photo of someone and like their family or their face or something, I find it makes their face look really unnatural, if that makes sense. I pick the newer phone every single time, I think. So I guess Apple does their research.
They're improving the camera for you.
Yeah.
So the processing is getting quite overt on the newer iPhones. But with the last 3 Pro models, that's not the end of the story.
The last thing I want to touch on here.
Yeah,
Listen,
particularly with this photo.
48 megapixels, ProRAW. That is where I think Apple has really changed the game. That's much more natural looking. And
Look at me.
I will be
that
damned.
smile.
Look at your jacket. Look at your face.
Yeah.
The light here, the range, this doesn't even look like a low light photo anymore.
No, it's, yeah.
We went from
It's been a long time cut, yeah.
to here. Man, this looks really good. ProRAW plus the 48 megapixel is now where the iPhone shines the most. Most people are gonna pick this one, I think.
Of all the software gimmicks on the iPhone, the most photographic is portrait mode.
Okay, so what we're doing right now is I'm sitting on ice to try out portrait mode, which was introduced on the iPhone 7 Plus, and provides kind of a simulated shallow depth of field, which you would get in a DSLR camera with a much bigger sensor.
So this, clearly, shot on a Sony A9 Mark II, very expensive mirrorless camera. This is the baseline. This is where you'd want it to be. This is the ideal situation.
So with the introduction of the 10R, they had the main camera only, but they wanted to give portrait mode a chance. And so they introduced an algorithmic-based portrait mode, which reads that I'm a person, tries to figure out my outline, and then apply this, bokeh effect around that. It uses the main wide camera, which contradicts how portraits have been traditionally taken with a more telephoto lens. So it certainly has a look, because you have to move the camera closer, and then you get barrel distortion, which is unflattering to the face. How close does the iPhone get?
The iPhone is capable of producing something that could dupe somebody. This is a very clear issue right here. This is an improvement. Still some trouble here.
That is a really challenge.
Just a very hard spot. I don't think any of them got it here.
Yeah.
But the fall off on your hood is much better because it was just like a blob of
really
blur,
weird, yeah.
which is what makes you look Photoshop.
This is portrait mode on the wide. Oh my goodness, even on the 14. This is
what I mean. I placed the tripod down, we stood you in a spot, and then you weren't close enough. The use case for it is slimmer because of the practicality. You have to meet Apple's parameters for the ideal shot.
Which one would I pick? I don't know. The left side just has a bit more of a blurred background than the right side. And then, on zoom, the right side is a bit sharper. I'll say the right side this time.
Is there much of a difference overall?
Not a lot. Like, the right side is just a bit cleaner.
Do you use portrait mode?
Sometimes, when I'm taking pictures of my dog. Very specifically.
I find portrait mode looks very unnatural. I would say initial impressions, I don't see a huge difference. It seems like the one on the right is doing better with the little fur on your coat. Like it's sharp and then it goes to blurriness, whereas the one on the left, it's just all the same amount of blurriness.
So you prefer the one on the right?
Yeah.
They look very similar. So it's almost like they tried to make it shallower depth of field on the one on the right, but then they have this transitional blur so that it doesn't look as like immediate. I like aspects about both of them. Yeah, I would say the one on the left, but I do like what they're doing with the one on the right a little bit. I feel like the one on the right is the newer phone and the one on the left is the older one.
Would you ever use portrait mode?
I had issues with the clunkiness of portrait mode in the app. The quickness of it, I don't think will ever beat a new or normal camera, and it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence because I know that it can probably fail.
Right.
And so that probability would refrain me from using it regularly. I think I just use my normal camera.
In terms of doing this whole experience, what's been the biggest takeaway?
I think to me, they're trying to cement the belief that you don't need anything else.
Especially now with what you know about the 14 Pro, would this be enough to make you switch back to iPhone?
With my knowledge of how to use the portrait mode on top of it, and the video features, and the ProRAW, and the fact that you could color correct the image and manipulate it however you want, because it is a raw photo that you're getting. Mm-hmm. I don't like iOS, Jonathan, but I'm still strongly considering it because I do need to upgrade my phone soon.
Even after all this, you would say, if you care about pictures,
buy a real camera. It is really cool to see the evolution of a product like this because it is so historical. You really do see that between the 7 Plus and the 11, the difference isn't that drastic. And now we're at the 14 Pro. The 48 megapixels is a big jump, but then do they really make another big jump after that? We'll see, I guess.
We'll find out next year.
Yeah.
Thanks for comparing every single MAC address video. If you like looking at many photos, give this video a like. And if you want to see more photos get taken, you might as well subscribe. Now, I'm curious, what iPhone camera did you find the best? Is it always the latest one, or was there an old iPhone camera you really developed an affection for, like those TikTokers?